Hey, everybody. Welcome in. I'm so excited for tonight's episode. I have got a special guest, Brian Kappel, and he wrote an awesome book called Relief. And I saw that on Instagram and was intrigued because I'm always wanting to learn new stuff. And I thought, wow, I'll check that out. And we got to conversing a little bit on Instagram and got to be buddies. And I told him, I guess I've had my channel since October. And before then, when I was thinking about doing a channel, I told him, if I ever do a channel, I'm having you on because that book is awesome. I sat down and read it in one night. So I'm about to bring him on. You're going to enjoy this. You're going to learn something. If you've read the book, you're going to love hearing it from him. He's very passionate about the subject. He's done a lot of research. But we're going to touch on, is it a 48 leaf? Is it a 49 leaf? We're going to touch on the printing and how they did it. We're going to touch on the cardboard the cards were made out of. We're going to touch on a lot of different things, variations and cards, and it's going to be just chock full of information, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to bring him on right now. Brian.
How we doing?
It's been a while in the making, and I'm so excited for this. So, man, it's awesome having you on here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and like you said, it's been a long time in the making, but here we are, so we're good to go.
Yeah, I'm going to share just real quick a picture. This is what the book looks like. It's available on all your outlets. I got mine off Amazon, so I'm pubbing your book, Brian. I
appreciate it.
It was awesome. Pick it up. You will not be disappointed. So, Brian, a little bit about you real quick. So I know you do something on the lines of design in your life, to make a real living. I know the book's paying you a little bit, but you're 9 to 5
on it, that's for sure.
So how's that play into your interest in the leaf cards and doing this research?
Yeah, I mean, from the time that I was a kid, I always drew, and so through growing up and going into college and everything like that, I started a career in more classical kind of like illustration, drawing, painting, but then had to pay the bills and everything like that. So became a apparel graphic designer for Nike, and then kind of through the career went down the path of getting into all kinds of different design from 2D to 3D, but kind of always kept that tie to the artwork. And so I still produce artwork, and I still, am trying to, as my professional career comes to the close, I'm trying to ramp up the art career, but it's always been this kind of amalgamation of a bunch of different kind of disciplines in what I do, which is great.
Right.
It keeps it interesting. But it started the interest in the leaf cards because I did, when I was in school, went through a whole printmaking class and had an affinity for it because it changed the way I drew, just because of doing dry point etchings and stuff like that for lithography. And so when I saw the cards originally, I was drawn to them just because of the colors. And then, the analytical eye started going in and kind of pulling it apart and being like, oh, wow, this is actually a fairly simplistic form of printing. Which made me like it even more, because I'm kind of drawn to the weird kind of outlier cards, the Burke Ross, those kinds of things that are just a lot of people are like, wow, that's a really ugly card, and then I'm kind of like, no, I really kind of like it, So it's that kind of started the affinity for it, and digging in on it when I started the collection, which was meant to be kind of like a heirloom piece to pass down to the kids, because it was great, because at that time, it was regarded as a 48 and a 49 set, which was my folks' birth year, and then my in-laws' birth year as well. So 48 and 49, I'm like, oh, this is great. We'll just pass this down to the kids. And so, like anybody else who has tried putting the set together, you go through the first 49 and you're like, wow, okay, I can get a lot of these really easy and fairly inexpensive. But when the Jackie came in, I thought I had a reprint. I thought I had a fake, because all the detail was gone in his hat.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh boy, I just spent, $800 on this. My wife's she's gonna kill me, so
yeah,
sent it off to PSA and got it authenticated, and it came back a 4. And I was like, well, why is this one different and this one's not? And so, again, going through the whole set, there's those 3 variations that are kind of like known in the industry, but it really kind of ties back to the Kent Peterson, because there's a black hat and a red hat Kent Peterson. And that kind of became the start of looking at the cards through a different lens, because it wasn't the only card that had a hat change. And then knowing the process of printing, you know that that's an actual variation because it's a change to the printing plate.
Right. And it's an iconic set, man.
Yeah.
They're absolutely gorgeous. And I know some people don't like them. Personally, I think they're awesome. I think, I would take that set over the Bowman set. I like the artistic look of it. It's just not, I don't know. There's something about it that just has an artistic flair.
I got to agree with you because I think to me it felt very much like a a rough and tumble kind of concert poster, like a wild posting, something that was like pulled on a screen, and it basically was, right,
Yeah.
and so I think that was kind of the appeal to me, was the kind of down and dirty, I don't want to say folksy, but I'll say folksy kind of approach to it. But you're right, through the baseball lens, and I think that's one of the things that really kind of struck me as well, is like when you go through that checklist, it's a fascinating crossroads in the history of baseball because of the people that are in that set, the people who had cards that were at the beginning of their career, the people with cards that were at the end of their career, the significance of that 48 time period as far as the game itself and what was going on in the game. It's a fascinating, little cross section of baseball history. And I think that became really the important part of it, is to kind of, digging in and reading the backs of the baseball cards, seeing, the facts that they had and everything like that. You're just like, wow, what a great fun set to kind of put together.
Yeah, and it's not just baseball history; it's American history, man.
Yeah.
You're coming out of World War II. You got. I'm gonna pull a couple cards up here. You got Babe Ruth. There's not. It's not a coincidence that card's number 3.
Yep.
Because that was in reference of him dying in 1948. So that's another little clue that it's a 49. You got Ted Williams just coming back from the war. Bob Feller, that's that. A lot of people considered this his rookie card when they thought it was a 48. You got DiMaggio, you got Honus Wagner, and you tell the story behind that. What's the big deal about what he's doing in that card?
Well, I think that again, I mean, each of these cards has a story into itself, which I think again is the fascinating part of the set. Is that Honus there, John at the time, manager of the Pirates, packing a nice big tobacco chew in his mouth. When the T206 card infamously was taken out of circulation because he didn't want kids going after the cards, because he didn't want them engaging with tobacco, which is again just one of those little fascinating little tales. I just had a talk with the Saber Babe Ruth chapter out of Baltimore.
Oh wow!
About the significance of the Leaf cards and Babe's passing, and what's interesting about it is that yes, that card, he dies August 16th, 1948. The card carries a 49 copyright on it.
Yeah, on the back.
And if you go through PSA's DNA registry, there's one autographed card.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah, do the math on that one.
Yeah, that's not even. Well, I don't know if I'd buy that one in an auction.
No, so what it is that his wife actually was known to sign autographs, and so there's actually also, I think, a 1962 card with Babe's autograph, and it's DNA like certified by PSA, but it's Mrs. Ruth. So yeah.
And then the Feller, that fell into the short print, right?
It did. Yeah, that was a tough one to come, to track down. And what's funny about Feller, and I mean, Feller and Musial were interesting characters because they call this a rookie card, but Feller's got cards that go back into the 30s. I mean, I think 38 was his rookie card. I think he's got a 38 Gowdy is his rookie card.
Yeah,
and so it's funny that they call it a mainstream rookie card when it's not even close by 10 years.
Yeah, Gowdy was a pretty widespread release there, so I don't think that. And then you got these guys. I mean, so you got 8 big rookie cards of Hall of Famers in this. Some are short prints, some are really hard to come by, like the Page and Adobe. A little harder, I should say. You got Spawn, Musial. I mean, they're different tiers, but I mean, so to me, what stands out about this set is the American history. The 3 guys you see there, Adobe, Robinson, and Page, they were trendsetters in my mind, almost American heroes for what they did, and Page, spending the majority of his life in the Negro Leagues and finally getting a shot, winning that World Series in 48, even though he had a limited role. But Dobie and what he did not getting his flowers, and then you got Jackie Robinson, and I mean, what else can you say?
Yeah.
So to have all those guys in here, and I'm not downgrading Hal Newhouser and Kiner and Kale, and of course Musial. He should get a lot more flowers than he gets. So
Yeah. Big time.
yeah, I mean, it was this set, and we'll bring his slide back up in a minute, but it's just to me one of the most amazing sets from so many reasons. But I wanted you to share a couple of your favorite cards. I'll share a few of mine, and then we'll get into some of these things I learned on your book.
Yeah, so I mean the heavy hitter cards I don't have on me since we're in the middle of moving. But I do have, I found myself just as a collector going through, and we bumped into each other in Strongsville, and so I found myself starting to kind of jump into the bargain bins and start practicing what I preach type thing. So it's like my searches now are for the oddballs, and so you have a card. Pull it over here, like Gerald Pretty.
Yeah.
Pretty standard card. It's a common, but once you've seen it one time, you've seen it 7 times, you kind of know what you're looking for. So 2 years ago when I was in Strongsville and I found this, that I was like, well, wait a minute, something's missing there. And in typical Leaf fashion, the blue ink had run dry. And so no more is the green in the background.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about it is that, you go on eBay and you see, because I was like, I had a guy who was at the Chantilly show. He sent me a picture of a Joe DiMaggio card that had no black ink. Yeah, again, pretty typical for how they kind of did things. And he asked me, is this one of one? And I said, no, it's one of 4. Because the way that they produce their cards is it was 4 sets on one sheet. And so if there was a ink well or key that had run dry, it was for 4 sets essentially. And so when I went on eBay to look for another Gerald Pretty, it was funny because there were 6 of them. So that means that 2 sheets went out with no blue ink, which seems to be the way that Leaf ran, is that if they had basically an inkwell run dry, it was the blue one. Because I've seen more cards out there that are missing blue than anything else. So here's a Sid Hudson. Oop.
Let me pull you up on the solo here.
So you can see that Sid here is just in the midst of losing all the blue ink, and you can see it's horribly registered as well. I mean, it's off by probably a good almost a ½ inch.
Yeah. It's one of those 3D cards I call it.
Exactly. But so it's funny because you've got the normal Sid Hudson.
Yeah.
But both of these are late prints, because what's funny is that when you pull up one that's from the early set, you can see his hat brim has no color.
Yeah.
But on the other ones, he's got red. So, again, it's just that this is now what I do is I go trolling through people's cards and looking for the ones that I just know, because I got them all memorized now. And so it's like, if I see something that's off, I'm just like, oh, now I'm totally fascinated by it. So
that's cool, man. So is that what got you from being a collector all the way? Oh, well, first I want to share a couple of mine.
Yeah. What you got?
So I discussed this with you at one point, and I started noticing the variations too. And I wanted the ones where you had the texture. So I wanted the really bright yellow, and I'll share this card here in a minute, but I wanted the bright yellow, and I wanted his hat to look like the blue jean,
Right.
And so we'll talk about that here in a minute. I got a boxing card.
Nice.
Yeah. And that was actually partly your fault, because you were sharing some boxing stuff.
Yep.
I got the Johnny Mize.
Nice.
This was early in my collecting. When I got back in, it's a Ted Williams. It's got tape on it. I wouldn't have bought a card with tape on it now, but man, at the time,
I love it.
I thought it told a story, and that's why I'm not upgrading it. I might do it one day. And then the Spawn. So I've only got 5, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that. The Dobie and the Page are so high on my list. I almost pulled the trigger on a Dobie in Strongsville.
No.
And didn't. And then there was one in a recent auction. It was I think it was a 4, and it was most perfect registration I've ever seen Adobe have. It wasn't that 3D look, and his eyeballs weren't off to
Right,
the
right.
side like Newhouser is so much.
Yep.
Anyways, yeah, I almost pulled it, but I didn't. I'm going to have to do that at some point. So you've kind of addressed this a little bit. So how did you go from being kind of like, man, these are really pretty? I know in your book you mentioned that this card right here reminded you of this
Yep.
fairly. I can't remember his first name. Uh, the artist.
Oh,
Um,
Shepherd.
yeah,
Yep.
is that Shepherd?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was Fairley. I don't know why, but
Shepherd Fairley is his name.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
Shepherd
yeah.
Fairley. Okay, that's where I was confused. So you said I don't know if it was this poster, but basically his
Yep.
art style kind of reminded you of that Vico card. And so, anyways, how did you go from that and then starting to collect and then thinking, I'm gonna just dig into this? And I saw where you got your dad, involved and write a book about it. How did you go? How did that happen?
You know what? It's one of those things that I tend to get when I get interested in something. I got to figure out all the nuts and bolts of it and everything like that. And so, like, the forums like Net54, I would go on there all the time. And at that time, Ted Zanadakis was still alive, and so he would constantly post. And he felt like I almost felt like when I wrote the book, I kind of took over for him as far as standing on the soapbox screaming at people, because he lived through it. He remembered, going down to the shop and buying the cards when he was a kid,
Right.
going off to war, coming back and everything like that. So he was this unbelievable resource on just bouncing ideas off of. And so he knew the cards in and out and had written a bunch of things about it, but it never connect all the dots. And so when I started kind of digging in, especially on the printing side of it, I would ask him a whole bunch of things as far as going through and saying, hey, Ted, when you went through and bought your packs, did you get long sleeve or short sleeve Cliff Aberson cards? And,
Wow.
And so he was this great resource because he went through it all.
And he
So,
remembered.
I was that?
And he remembered that
He
particular.
remembered that. Yeah. No,
Wow.
it's if you ever get a moment to go back and read his posts on Net54, it is a unbelievable resource of knowledge, because he was around. Anybody who collected through the 80s, 70s, 60s knew Ted, because everybody talked to him and he had just collected all the way through. And so he was this great resource on everything that I would be able to say, well, what about this? And he's like, no, it's this, not this. Okay, great.
Right.
So, that kind of started me. And then, it's funny because when I started kind of pulling all the information together, I think it was my wife that actually was like, "You should write a book. You got all this information." All right, well, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm sitting in my father-in-law's office right now, and he and I do a lot of collecting, and so I bounce things off of him, and I bounce things off of my dad, and bounce things off of my wife, and my kids, and everything like that. And so it kind of became this conglomeration of, when I would find something, it would be like this shared epiphany with this whole group.
Yeah.
And so that kind of spurred on the writing of the book to kind of capture all these things and bring it all into focus. And so through that, the print side of it was fun, because it was my great uncle, who was 99 at the time,
Yeah.
having a conversation with him, because he was actually a printmaker in the late 40s. After
Yeah.
he'd come back from war, he was a flight engineer, and my great grandfather owned a print house in Midtown Manhattan, and he worked there. And so, getting his point of view of showing him the cards and hearing him just absolutely blast the techniques on how they did it, just kind of validated a bunch of other things too. So, it became a very kind of fun thing that, it's like, yeah, you got your full-time job and all that stuff. And anybody who's into the hobby, like we all are, we enjoy the little pockets that we get, to kind of go through and do that. And so I started, basically I would get up in the morning, and probably for a good hour and a half, I'd either research or write. And then, when it got to the point of ready to publish, I would go through and do all the illustrations in the book and everything like that. So it was it's a love letter to the collecting of baseball cards, is what that book is
Yeah.
basically. It's the thing that resonates with most of us, as far as going through and kind of sharing experiences and kind of understanding more of the little pockets. And then it was, a year ago, I got the actual, documents, and it was like, oh, I was actually right. So, so that changed the whole thing up right there.
So, what was the time frame from the first time you Googled something or did something like, wow, I want to check this out? And whether it was Net 54 or whatever, from that point to you writing the book and getting it published, what was the time? Was it 5 years,
No, it
six
was 2 years. It was
years?
2 years. Yeah. So
Wow.
it came on the heels of me completing the set,
Yeah.
and then just kind of starting to pull together ideas and stuff like that. And you know, my dad is a hydrogeologist, and so he's big on research and stuff like that. So there would be things that I would just kind of throw out there, and then the next morning he would send, oh, I found this. Oh, okay, great. And so we kind of had the yarn wall thing going on, where it was like I would go on and I would find this, and he would find this article, and then we'd be like, well, wait a minute. Overland is actually Leaf, and Dietz Gum is actually Leaf, and they actually produce cards. And oh, here's this article, and here's this. And so we ended up going to the Chicago History Museum because the personal effects of basically Saul Leaf's son, Marshall, were there. And so we were able to go through and look through a bunch of pictures because we were looking for that smoking gun. We were looking for that document that was like, you know, and we were close. We didn't go to we should have gone to the Cook County Archives, but you know, we got a bunch of things, and they had some pictures that I have in the book of, you know, the factory floor.
Yeah.
And they had a bunch of cards. They had boxing cards, and they had football cards there. And it was interesting reading about the incorporation of Leaf brands, which happened in 1947, and they started in 48 producing in the new factory that was on North Cicero. And so when you kind of jumped into that, it was like, okay, so now we've got this great picture of they're producing candy, but they're trying to do anything they can to push candy sales.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you know, it's funny with the whole notion that it was a 48 set, you start going through, it's 48, 48, 48. When you start reading the backs of the baseball cards, even before I got the lawsuit stuff, you start reading the backs of the baseball cards, there's things that are happening in December.
Yep.
And so understanding that a candy company would be stopping production of their candy boxes going into Christmas, not going to happen. Not going to happen at all. So it's like, yes, there was work done in 48, and that's why those copyrights say 48. But even though they say 48 on the copyright, it's still information that happened after the season was over.
Yeah, like the two examples you pointed out was Lou Boudreau
Mm-hmm.
and Musial. Both,
Yep.
It talks about the fact they won respective awards in their leagues, and those weren't given out until what, December 5th?
Yeah, it was late, really
Yeah.
late. And then there was one trade, and I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Harry Walker.
Yeah.
Was traded, and that trade went down, I think, December 19th.
Yeah.
So again, you know, you start doing the actual, you know, trying to figure this all out, and it's like there's no way that a candy company is going to stop it in their season, you know, the season that they do the highest volume, that they're going to stop their presses from printing, you know, Santa Claus on a candy box and do baseball cards. It's just not going to happen.
Well, I know, for example, Dobie and Page both referenced the World Series in 48 when the Indians won.
Yep.
So sure, it could have been in the fall, like the 33 Gaudy Sport Kings set. Carl Hubble, it references things in that season, but they say it was released later that in the winter and the fall.
Right.
So because they did different series throughout the year, and that one was in the late series. So it is possible, but man, when stuff's happened in December, there's no way.
Well, and then you also have to remember that how they laid out the sheets, right? Yeah. Of the 49, basically the 49 cards that they would lay out. On there, it was I think it was an even split of 33 and 16 of the copyrights. There was 33 of 1948 and 16 in 1949. So it's like, I mean, again, when you start doing that, and again, you know, tipping a hat to Ted had figured out a lot of that stuff, just hadn't connected quite everything yet.
Yeah. So the thing I'm about to talk about, in my mind, was the biggest blockbuster thing that come out in the hobby maybe in the last 10 years. It went nuts, and honestly, it surprises me how many people don't know about this. Greg Miller, my buddy with Midlife Cards, he just did a thing he calls My Five, and myself and Mookie Chilson and Mike Petty and Darren Return from Collecting and Greg, we do different sets, and we rank our top 5 in that set. And we just did the Leaf set, and some guy, he commented on there because he had it listed as the 49 Leaf.
Mm-hmm.
Some guy said it's the 48. And I'm like, dude, where have you been? So it's very much so. Here's the document, and I want you to share, number one, how you found this and what went through your head when you saw it. So here's the document. It's in your book.
Yep.
And tell a little bit about this.
So what's funny about this is that this happened on my birthday last year. That basically, again, through it was through Net54. Another person who was posting is in the current, I guess, the process of writing an entire book about how basically this litigation within the baseball card hobby has formed the hobby.
Yeah.
And he sent me a note and he said, "Hey, just to let you know, I just went to the Cook County Archives and I found this. It hasn't been digitized, and it's the basically the lawsuit, the answer, and the settlement that happened between Leaf and Bowman."
Right.
And so in it is just, and going through and reading it, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's all here. Like it's literally all here. From them saying, yeah, Leaf admits to the fact that they went out to buy new equipment so that they could print in-house. And you're like, oh, great. And then I think this is what you have up, is that it basically said, yeah, they acknowledge the fact that the first truck left on March 14th, 1949 from Chicago to Boston.
Yeah. I mean, it's right there.
Right there.
That's court documents.
That's a court document, yeah.
And Leaf admitted to that. I mean, that's Leaf saying that.
Yep. And so, and I go into it in the book, but it still cracks me up, looking at something through the lens of knowing what happened after all of this, that this document was, went to court, was seen, everything like that. One of Bowman's big things was that, Leaf had no agreements with any of the players. Bowman did. But then Bowman also said, look, these guys is the first set they've ever produced. And so later in the document, you actually see that they actually go through and they say, no, we've got Overland, we've got Dietz Gum, we've got and all these things that we had found along the way. And we're like, oh, we found this, and it was just like, it's there. And then they went through and had like this exhibits where they had actual, okay, well, this is the packaging, this is the card, this is what we've done, this is packaging,
right.
All that kind of fun stuff. And at the end of it, on the last page was, oh yeah, there's somebody else doing baseball cards. And they came out in 1948, and here's what they look like. It's a company called Topps.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
it was the Hocus Pocus cards, right?
Yeah, it was the Hocus Pocus cards. And what's so funny about that is what happened next in the saga, right. That it was just like this teaser, just like, ooh, yeah. Steer clear of that, because Bowman essentially used the same playbook that they used with Leaf against Topps, and Topps was like, no, we're going to take you back to court, we're going to bankrupt you, and just burn you out in litigation, then we're going to buy your company, and now we own you. So
what was, I always say Bowman, they were pronounced it different, I guess it matters.
It's regional.
Yeah. So Bowman, when they what were they so pissed off about?
So there's a document that I have in there that it's funny because they actually cite the document, which was a sales document. And on the sales document, it's just riddled with lies, which is hilarious because it's like, we're going to put 300 cards in the set. And it's like, nope, came up short there. Because, I mean, they only numbered them technically to 168. So it's like, and they skip numbered them. So there wasn't even 168 cards. So they were 70 short of what they said there was going to be. And they were, substantially less than what they claimed, for the sales document. But on there, they cited, well, first of all, they said, there's a picture of Babe Ruth in the bottom of every box. So again, the conversation they had with Sabre, that was the thing, is like they were maximizing everything they possibly could. They're slapping Babe Ruth on just to say, oh yeah, come and buy the cards.
That was the Leaf premium thing.
Yeah, that was the premium. Yep. And they said it was a two color premium, which I thought was hilarious because it's like the only one that they produced was Babe Ruth, but that was the only one that was two color.
Oh.
and then they said, oh yeah, and there's other ones too, and there's another 7 of them, but again, good luck finding them. But then they also said that the cards are bigger. They said substantially bigger, better for lagging.
Yeah. So explain what lagging is.
Okay. So lagging, which is funny because I've explained it more than I ever thought that I possibly would. Because we used to do it in the late 80s with my buddies and I, that basically you would take a pack of cards. And if you got tired of doing just pack wars where you would just slap down a card and be like, all right, my guy's better than your guy, I get your card.
Yeah.
The next skill level up was that you would take the card and you would fling it up against the wall.
Right.
And so whoever's card stood up straight would win all the cards that were around him.
Right.
And so that was the marketing push was, hey, these are great for kids. It's low level gambling, but our cards are better for it. So,
Yeah. And they are bigger.
they
And
are.
they are brighter in this case. Like
Yeah.
that's my
And
Jackie Robinson right there on the right. And
yeah,
that sucker glows, man.
yeah, it
But
does.
but there's some that are duller, and that's because of the printing process and the
Yep.
type of cardboard they use. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But yeah, so I just find it interesting that if Leaf doesn't say all those things, what are they taking to court? I don't
Well,
know.
I think so, because I think that it's Johnny Mize had some issues early on in his career with his likeness being used on things. So again, we start dipping a toe into NIL, some very contemporary things that are going on as far as name, image, likeness that was going on back then as well. And so you kind of get this thing where it's like Mize had some issues with it early on, and then all of a sudden it was like, all right, well, Bowman goes out and they sign, I think it was like 273 players.
Yeah.
And Leaf, Saul Leaf, I mean, in an interview with Marshall, he basically said, yeah, his dad didn't believe in paying athletes to use their likeness and wasn't going to do it. So, I mean, no discussion. That was just it. He was just, so I think that it probably would have gone to court, but I don't think it would have been as aggressive as it was, because I mean, the court documents are pretty harsh. They're just like, yeah, not only are you going to stop and destroy everything that you have, but you're going to pay all of our players, basically damages for using their likeness without their permission.
Yeah. And what I found interesting was they said that Saul Leaf wasn't even a baseball fan. He lived a few blocks from Wrigley Field, never went to a game.
Never went to a game. So, again, he was a candy man. He was not there was no push to have this like longevity of baseball cards, via the gum and everything like that. He just saw it as he liked the cards because they prevented the gum from breaking.
Right. It was basically like the Cons Wiener card. It was basically like a divider card. He just stayed in there to keep the package stiff.
That's it.
Yeah. So that's wild to think back about that. And now here we are in 2025 talking about a set from 1949. But we're card geeks. That's what we do. So,
that's what we do.
And it's cool. So that brings up the next thing. So, and I know you've had a little bit of pushback on this, and I have too, because I've done Instagram posts about it. So if we know for certain that 49 was the distribution date, it's no way you can argue with me. Go in my comments and tell me that it's a 48.
I got your back.
But you'll be wrong, and Brian's going to back me up. But it's a 49. So if that's right. If that is right, let me pull that up again. Which one's a rookie card? I'm going to say Bond Bread, but that's just me. But let's just say you go with widespread release. Which one's a rookie card?
Leaf. Because technically speaking, again, the lawsuit doesn't happen if Leaf hits the market first, and Leaf hit the market first.
Well, but here's what I'm going to counter with. In 1981, Donruss came out.
Yeah,
you know where I'm going with this.
I know where you're going. Yeah,
there were three sets.
It's the whole that it gets punched through on all of it.
Al Ripken Jr. Right. Which one's his rookie card?
Yeah.
Are we going to go back and say, well, this one was on the shelf 2 weeks before that one? Right. No, it's never been that. All of those were 81s.
Yep.
And so no, I mean, they're both rookie cards.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, since we're all card geeks here, it's the Bond Bread. I mean, it's the 47 issue. I mean, that's easy. Just like Mutual's rookie card isn't the Leaf card either, because he had Cuban issue cards in 47.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's I think it's one of those things that I always tell collectors when I'm talking to them that it's outside of the whole grading thing. It's buy the card, not the grade. But I also say just buy the card you like. I mean, I love the Bowman card. I don't own the Bowman card. I would love to get a Bowman card, but I don't own it. But I think it's a fantastic card.
It is.
But I've got the Leaf one, and I'm like, yeah, I'm happy with that. So yeah, it's been funny that whole rookie card discussion that kind of blew up probably about 6 months ago, that it was like, it was a thing that people were just, they were kind of losing it about. And again, going back, and this is going back farther than a year, but when I had a discussion with Dr. James Beckett, he and I kind of offline, and I was like, boy, I'm trying to get PSA to kind of recognize this. And he's like, never happened. Because
Well, the reason
there's too much financial thing involved in it, because you've got these people who have invested a ton of money into that being his rookie card, that if all of a sudden there was a wholesale change on that, I mean, it's not going to devalue it. That's the thing, but it's going to knock it down a little bit.
But Bowman's going to go way up.
Bowman's going to go. I think what you're going to see is, bring it to the contemporary age. I think you're going to see it's like a 1984 star card for Jordan.
That's exactly.
It's like there's a mainstream understanding. Oh, 86 Fleer, that's his rookie card. That's his rookie card. That's his rookie card. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a minute. What about these star cards from 1984? Because that's his rookie year.
Yeah. Well, that's
how the market changes,
in my opinion, because there was a lot of people out there pushing that thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get the same push from people going, well, no, it's not the rookie, because now you're trying to say, but anyways, where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
But so that gets to this. So if all these aren't rookie cards anymore, I mean, so, if you really want to get down to it, and some of them weren't anyways, but I saw this on Saber, and I wanted Jason's cards. And what's his name? I didn't know.
Schwartz. Yeah, Jason. He's great. He's a big Leaf football guy.
Okay. So he put this on there, and he kind of talks about the rookie card status. If Leaf is a 49, which we know it is, this is the rookie card status. So some of them, they lose their card status to the 48 Bowman, like the Musial, if you're not counting the Latin card.
Right.
And then Warren Spahn and Kiner. And then Hal Newhouser, it still keeps it. And then you got the ones in the yellow. It's tied with the 49 Bowman. And then Jackie Robinson, he's throwing it out to swell. We didn't even mention that one.
Right.
But that's the 48. The Bond Bread, we know there's at least 247. So if you're going to get the swell, to me, you got to go Bond Bread. So I'll disagree with him there. But, yeah, so it affects a lot of people in the worth of their cards and their values and all that stuff. And anytime you start dealing with somebody's money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to have a little bit of pushback. So,
and some of the venom that kind of came my way for pulling the curtain back on it, I had to remind everybody that, my Jackie's been affected by this too. Mine's not in a bubble that it's like, oh no, mine's still a rookie card, but everybody else is devalued.
So when you saw that court document, did it hit you at that very moment what you had found?
Yeah, it did. Again, being so deep into it, and then reading the actual legal document, and I'm no lawyer. I mean, trust me. Yeah, but so it was funny when on those Saber presentations, when I was on with actual lawyers and they basically came to the same deductions that I did, I was like, yes, score one for the creative guy. But it's funny because it's like when you kind of dig in and you see it in writing, that you're just like, wow, okay, so we had these ideas, but being able to actually go in and kind of lock them in on stone, it was just like, all right, we got it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I can't imagine the fact you did that and it just sent shockwaves. And Saber's talking about it.
I know.
I mean, it was a pretty big deal,
Yeah, I mean, it made The Athletic. I mean, it was on SI.com. I mean, it was all this kind of stuff, and I was just like, whoa, because it was funny because I was ready to go to print. April of last year, I was ready to go to print, and it was, basically I had an entire chapter devoted to, here's my theory. I don't know if this is right, but after going through all of this, here's my theory. And I actually had to rewrite the last half of the book because it was like, okay, now that we've got this, we've got it in stone. And now we can say, without a doubt, here it is. This is what it says.
Yeah. Well, we're about to jump into the next little thing. This to me, what we've just talked about is mind blowing. So that's been a lot of fun. This next thing's really cool. I like this kind of stuff too. We're going to talk about the different variations. So we've already talked about the fact that here's a candy company. Dude ain't a baseball fan. He doesn't give a crap. He's just printing up cards as cheaply and as quickly as he can to stuff inside of a wrapper with a piece of candy. By the way, how many cards came in a pack? Was it just
5?
5. Okay.
Yep.
And that was the only, there was, because I know in the past, some in back in the day, you get one card, or some
Yeah.
packs you get 5, but every pack was 5.
I believe so. Yeah. I think it was 5 because there was some, I think the variance was 3 cents or 5 cents. And I think 3 cents was the wholesale price. So
Oh,
on that sales document, it came out and it said, "Oh yeah, it's 3 cents," and then the actual printed price on the box was 5. So
so they lied about that too.
yeah,
Well, so we're going to pull up the first variation. I want you to kind of explain a little bit about what the difference is. That's my Jackie on the left. And again, I wanted that one, like you're saying, what yours ended up was the one on the right.
yep.
So explain the differences
Okay,
and why.
so essentially, all right. So if we go into just baseball terminology, baseball card terminology, okay, of a variation, right? And I call out a couple of them in the book, but the idea that a printing plate was physically changed causes a variation, okay?
Right.
Because a lot of people, including the grading companies, won't acknowledge any kind of variation because they say, "Oh, we know about the color issues. We know about all this, the color changes here and everything." It's not that, because, like you said, they were trying to basically push these out as fast as they could with whatever ink they could get from their distributor. And again, this
Cheap as they could get it.
yeah, in design terms, standardized ink colors doesn't come out until the mid 50s. So
Oh.
they're basically going to their ink distributor and going, "Yeah, I need blue." Okay, well, they get a periwinkle one week, they get a royal the next week, right? So you start kind of seeing that. So this has nothing to do with the color variations. This has to do with the physical printing plate. And so, like on the Kent Peterson card that is recognized by all the grading companies, he has a black hat variation and he has a red hat variation. And what they did was they went through and they actually masked off the black plate so that you couldn't, basically those details, that what you're talking about, that denim kind of feel on his cap, no longer came through and the hat was brighter. So
Right.
basically, by taking out all the black, all the red that was in back of it would then just shine right through.
Right.
And so that's what you see. So it's a physical change to the printing plate. And then on some cards, Jackie being one of them, Babe Ruth being another one, Phil Rizzuto, and a couple others, they actually went into the color plate and actually added. So again, we're talking about physical changes to the printing plate because they added those 2 yellow bars that sit on either side of Jackie's shoulders there to basically close off the background.
Right.
So it becomes a true variation that way, because it's actually changed. It's not a fluke. It's not a wet sheet transfer. It's not something that's a flaw in the actual process. It is a change to the printing plate, which makes it a true variation.
Right. And then I'm going to share another one. This will be another example.
Yep. So again, same thing here, where it's like the one on the left, you can see that Lou's got a darker hat, but you can see there is a little bit of red in there. And then you go over, and same thing as the yellow bars on the Jackie here. So you got the 2 yellow bars that go down on either side of his shoulder. And then all the black has been removed from his cap except for the underside, which makes the hat blue, which makes the brim red.
So are you calling these type 1 and type 2?
I call them early print and late print.
Okay. So
because, yeah.
I'm going to point something out. I'll pull up the Musial too, because this one was really obvious. So when I was pulling up these images, I went on VCP, and you can see I pulled up 2 5s, right? 2 PSA 5s. And I basically went on VCP, and I went through all the sold cards that were listed. And let me tell you something, finding one that's the variation, that's the later one, is really, really difficult. I would go through sometimes 30 cards to 1 to find it. And then sometimes it'd be 45 to 1. So talk a little bit about that part of it.
So my number that I go to is they are 30% of the population is the late print. Now that could be wrong,
right.
but that's where I'm at, because basically what I did was I took the total population of the Kent Peterson cards and used that percentage and kind of laid against it. But like you said, you go through and you check out the sold cards, and it comes out to roughly about 30% of the population. So it's a third of the cards are late print cards. Now there's some that, and again, we're talking just about the first 49. And there's the outliers, which is the Hermansky and the Aberson. because the Aberson has the short sleeve, long sleeve. But as far as I could tell, that happened super early. So there was a middle print change that happened on that one, but nothing else changed as far as I could tell. But then the late print one, I think it's only 30% of the pop is that.
Right. Well, this Mutual, I mean, it's so obvious what they did to his hat.
Oh, you can see it clear as day. I mean, if you get a chance to see one in person, it's basically like they took a piece of masking tape and just ran it straight down the hat and said, "Yep, that's a red hat." So,
so as far as the background and everything, that has nothing to do with the late print, early print. That just has to do with what color blue or
whether it was in the can. Yeah, I mean,
whether it was running low on ink that day.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. And it's funny because of the way they went through and did it in the half tones that they have, which are the little dots that create the colors. So when you're combining and you get greens, like on the Joe DiMaggio, there'll be cards that you'll see that are like a pea green, and then there's that are more like a lime green. Well, that's because one of the inks may have been running low. So if the blue was running low, which I said it happened quite a bit, you would get more of that pea green kind of looking background for the actual green for like the DiMaggio.
Well, explain this to me. Like one of the things I was attracted to about my Jackie is how bright it is. It's the brightest one I've ever seen.
Yeah.
When I got it on eBay, and when I got that thing, I honestly thought that somebody had gone in their filter on their photos,
right,
and fudged it. But man, when I got it, that's actually what it looks like. That there is no filter on that. So what would have made that sucker come out so much brighter? And then some of them, they can be a PSA 7 because they got sharp corners, a little centered, but they're almost fuzzy looking.
Yeah. So the problems that just plague all the Leaf cards is registration and centering. And what it is, as far as I can tell, and again, this would have fallen into the my theory category, right? They were running them through one color at a time. And so when you do that, unless you have guides set up that you're sending the sheets through, there's going to be a slight shift, that you're going to get shifts in the colors. So if you're laying just the yellows down, and then you're putting the reds down, and then you're putting the blues down, and then you're putting the blacks down, the likelihood of those all being perfect, I mean, after a while of running them, you're probably in pretty good shape, but the first couple are probably going to go a little wonky, right? And so that's where you get, like you said, on the Larry Doby with the eyeballs kind of shifting off, and Dom DiMaggio's are horrible too, where you just kind of get these floating kind of googly eyeballs all over the place. But it's so the reason probably that your Jackie is as bright as it is because it's one of the ones that had more of the white stock that was on the face of the card, and it was a bright ink, because there are ones out there that yellow kind of shifts a little bit more towards like an athletic gold. Like it's a little bit more orangey than it is yellow.
So on the short print, that was towards the end, right? So my understanding from reading your book, the lawsuit's happening.
Yep.
And they're just rushing those things through there. Is that why they're so off registration? Because they're just rushing them so bad?
Yeah, I think what it was is they kind of had the indication that was coming down the pipe, and they just kind of started pushing them out. I think they got shut down. So the initial lawsuit happened in March of 49, and then their East Coast distribution was shut down in May of 49. That essentially Bowman went after their East Coast guys that were based out of Philadelphia, just kind of the home turf type approach to it. And so they shut them down there. And that's why, as Beckett said, during the 70s when they were going around, they had heard that there was another set of 49. Nobody could have ever seen them or anything like that, but they started turning up in the Great Lakes. And so, which makes sense that basically if the East Coast had been shut down, they were going to put it in the proximity of, basically Chicago and points east, but not to the East Coast.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit another thing kind of blew my mind. How did you figure out, and were you the first one to kind of publish it or come out about it, that they were actually using the materials the same materials that made the boxes are making the cards, not a different type of cardboard? I build cabinets for a living.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes depending on what the cabinet is, It's either 3/4 thick, it's 1/4 inch, it's 1/2 inch. Sometimes it has a veneer. There, we don't use a lot of MDF, but there are cases where we have to, and it's got a different texture than the plywood. So, we do things on purpose. It's like they were trying to keep it as simple as possible. But how did you come about? I know at first I think it was a theory, and then you kind of so go through that
Yeah.
process.
So again, this is just me being crazy. Candidly, it's I kind of wanted to know where they were getting the stock from, because again, I put it in my, and you're probably the same way, where it's like you put it in your entrepreneurial head,
Yeah.
right? That there's something that comes down, and you're like, well, I've got this piece of equipment in the corner. Oh, we can do this with that equipment, and now we've got another way to kind of generate all this kind of revenue. And so I'm like, all right, well, if that's what they're doing, then wait a minute here. I wonder if they were printing everything in house? Because again, if you look at the pictures of the North Cicero factory, it was massive. It was a huge factory, and it's like, wow, you're making candy in that whole thing. And so I kind of started poking around with the idea, because I think it was either Overland. No, it was Overland. That when Saul had bought the building for the Overland Company, he actually bought, and it was an old cardboard factory.
Oh, yeah.
And so that triggered it, where I was like, well, wait a minute. If he's buying an old cardboard factory, I wonder if he's making his own boxes. So, of course, did what we all do and turned to eBay and basically started searching for 1940s Leaf boxes and Overland boxes. And so I got the Overland one in first, and it came in, and it was actually a laminated box. So it was a chip cardboard box that had, basically like a paper stock laminated over top of it. I'm like, well, that's not it.
Yeah.
And then I got in the Five Sums box, and I'm like, I think this is it. And I had the boxing card that had no printing on the back, and flipped over the box and put it right on it. And I'm like, it's a match. That's it.
That's
Flipped
insane.
it over on the front. I'm like, that's it. They did it. And so, again, that was one of those things that was validated by going to the History Museum, because they had the picture of the factory floor. And in the background, in the very background, you could see the printing press, and you could see the sheets of what the candy was that they were producing, or what the boxes that they were producing was.
I don't know if you can make this out. You got a red star by those are uncut sheets of Leaf cards back there in the background, and then there's the boxes in the foreground.
So I think those are actually they're not the cards. So I think those are the uncut sheets of the boxes that they were producing that day. But it's the same sheet size.
Isn't that crazy?
So, essentially they just retooled everything. And like I said, they were probably the swing shift guys. They were probably the guys that were working overnight, that were just trying to crank through as many cards as you possibly could.
And there's the factory.
Massive factory.
Yeah, old school factory.
Yep.
So anyways, this book, guys, pick this book up. If you think this has been interesting, pick the book up, because I was blown away, and it's not like that thick either. It's
an easy read. I'm a design guy. Yeah, it's a lot of pictures, not many words. I mean,
so I think I read it in a night, man.
Yeah.
I couldn't put it down, and it just man, it had me in a trance. So were you the first one that you had to be the first one that figured?
I think so. I'd never seen anyone had ever addressed the stock. And again, that comes from the art side, that comes from the printmaking side, that comes from the, if I want to know everything about this story, I want to know everything about this story. Right. And so that's why I, jumped in and kind of was like, all right, well, let's figure out where the stock's coming from. And again, when I took it to my Uncle Lester, he looked at it and he was just like, well, they're not reprinting Van Goghs, so I mean, he kind of broke it down to that level. But again, you take it in, I cited in the book that this idea that it was a very simple screen print, like Warhol was doing after that in the 50s, that it's basically, it's a separation of colors. You're pulling the colors, layering them on top of each other, and sending it out the door.
And it's pretty clear that Warhol saw these cards.
I think so. He had an affinity for baseball, and I mean, there's a substantial amount of Pirates in that set. So
yeah. So they had pirate sets. We got about 5 more minutes. So I want to do something fun. They got pirate sets. They got football sets. Of course, the baseball. Share some of your cool stuff real quick. I want to just we'll go rapid fire.
We'll rapid fire here. I'll pull this one out here
on the big screen.
So this is one of my favorite. And again, when you know the story of Leaf, you kind of get into things. And so at the boxing cards, I mean, baseball was the total gateway, right? Where it was like, all right, well, if I start on the baseball, then I'm not going to go on. And I started just buying everything. But, you get into the
Whoa.
boxing cards, and Joe Louis, awesome. But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. We got color variations there too. So, and what's funny is you can actually find the Joe Lewis's that there's no blue. So it's like all red gloves and trunks, and then you've got the purple ones kind of over here, and
Yeah.
I guess the true blue, and then the purple and stuff like that. So it's like, once Leaf kind of started going through and doing what Leaf did best, which was changing things on the fly, it became this just constant carousel of changes of things that would always change.
Do you know if they had their own art department that colorized the pictures?
Yeah, so that's the thing that I've never been able to find out, because there's a part of me that wonders, because they said that on that one advertising piece that they had for the sales group, they had 1949 biographies written by sports writers. So there's a part of me that wonders if the photos that they got were actually wire photos, that basically they had somebody and they paid them however much to basically grab all the wire photos, because I just think that it's odd that they're getting access to those images someplace.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I've always wanted to kind of try and track down is the images for the pirate cards,
Yeah.
because this is my new obsession, is trying to find these, and they're absolutely difficult to find. But when I started sending them in and started buying lots of them, I started noticing that there's cards that come and they have no number on the back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
You
so
talk about that in the book.
in the book, yeah, that basically that I think this was the proof of concept for them doing cards, because they go through and there's so many colors in this, and there's so much. I mean, they're like I said in the book, they use halftones like they were going out of style, because they were creating all kinds of colors, and I think that became production wise kind of a pain. And so that's why you see the boxing set that came out right after these, they don't even use yellow, they just use black, red, and blue.
Oh, wow.
So but I think these without the number on them became a significant part of it, because I think that when they sent them out, the sales guys came back and said, hey, if you put numbers on the back of the cards, kids will chase the entire set. Yeah. And then Saul Leaf was like, if you skip number the cards, they'll chase the set and never get the set.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that was a page right out of 33 Goudies right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just hold back the nap. So,
Yeah.
it's just funny. Well, and I think that the more that I've gotten to know the set, and the more that I've kind of looked at, well, especially the pirate thing, just because, again, like I said, pirates have become my gateway drug into everything. I started doing Sea Raiders, and I had a Sea Raider card right on top of a Leaf pirate card, and they're the exact same size.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, I think Gowdy was actually a North Star when they started putting together the set as far as what they were going to do. Because, again, you go back to Sports Kings and they had boxing, and then the football. And, so it's like all of a sudden it became, what could we offer? What could we put out there? And I think that Gowdy kind of laid the foundation on that.
Yeah. You got a favorite football card sitting by you, or you didn't have those with you?
You know what? I got, can't go wrong with Sid.
Here, let me pull you up on the big screen here.
Wow. So again, Sid Luckman, awesome, right?
Yeah.
I'm a Penn State guy, so Steve Suey. I mean, you can't go wrong with Steve Suey. And then you got Doak.
Oh yeah.
And then let's see, do I have my tail? Well, I mean, again, if we're going to talk about Jackie, talk about his teammate.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Yep.
And he played with Jackie at UCLA.
He did.
Yeah.
And Leo DeRocher said he was a better ball player than Jackie.
No kidding. I never heard that quote.
Yep. So he actually thought that he was a better ball player than Jackie was. Wow. So, I think, again, if you're a college football guy, if you're an NFL football guy, that set, fantastic. I mean, it's funny that the 48 football set is the only true numbered set that Leaf produced.
And that was a 48.
That was a true 48, yep. Because the 49 set that came after that, they skipped numbered and they only produced 49 of them. So.
And I hate college football, by the way.
Right. Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's horrible. So.
Well, Brian, this has been awesome, dude. This hour flew by. I feel like I've been talking for 10 minutes. And thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up. But again, this book, go get it. Make this man rich. Put him on the bestseller list.
There we go.
Hobby guys, step up. and girls. So, well, Brian, thanks, buddy. This has been fun, and I've looked forward to it for a reason, and it didn't disappoint. So, I appreciate you,
Well,
man.
thank you. It was a hoot, and like I said, it was great to meet you in Strongsville. I hope to do it again here soon.
All right, thanks, man.
All right.
Bye bye.
See ya.